So now let's go ahead and start recording the CSS in part 2. So what I typically like to do is I'm a big fan of using a reset file. Some of you aren't, some of you are. At least for this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, I have a template that I use for all of my projects that includes a reset, but we're not going to use that for now. So let's go ahead and just grab one. The most popular one is probably Eric Meyer's. So we'll go to his website, meyerweb.com. And I believe he has it in his toolbox. Come down to CSS and reset.css. So let's come down and we will just grab all of this. Now, we will edit it slightly, and that's what you're supposed to do. Even Eric Meyer admits you need to tailor it to your own project, so don't just blatantly just copy every single thing in. For example, I'm not going to use the SAMP tag, so I don't need it in my project. Okay, I've copied that. I'm going to come back and paste it into my CSS file. And let's do a quick bit of cleanup. I'm not going to have any tables in this project at all. No delete, no insert. We'll keep focus. We'll keep block quotes. Let's get rid of a little more. No tables, no caption, no legend. Let's get rid of that. What else? No center, none of those old deprecated tags. No var, none of this. Actually, we'll keep strong. No strike. And you know what you should do then is save this to your desktop and import it into all of your projects once you kind of get something tailor-made for you. Just a little bit more to clean up. Won't use site or big or address or acronym or abbreviation. No iframe. No applet. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So let's just go ahead and give this a heading. We'll do reset. And now let's get started with our some of our main styling. But to keep it a little more entertaining, let's do it in Firefox. That way you can kind of see the changes that we make. So refresh it. You can immediately see what that reset did. It reset all of our headings down to 100%, got rid of all the margins and paddings. Now, you might initially think that this makes it harder, but once you kind of learn to work with it, it'll actually save you, a ton of time with headaches and figuring out why, an unordered list has more padding in Explorer than another, and things like that. So using the Web Developer toolbar, I'll hit Control-Shift-E, and I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and we'll create a new section called Main Styles. Now the first one we'll do is the HTML. So HTML, and let's give it a background of that blue texture that Jeffrey had. So we'll do URL, and that's stored within images/bg.png, and I do want that to repeat. Okay, so why is that not showing up? Images/bg. Oh, where did that come from? Get rid of that, and there we go. So now we have our nice blue background. Let's go ahead and work on our container div. Remember, this is the div that wraps the entire website. So container. And remember, Joffrey gave it a width of 800 pixels. And just while we're working, let's give the background of gray, just to kind of see the edges. So we'll set the margins. I want about 3 ems of spacing at the top. So we'll do 3 ems on the top and then make them auto on the left and right to make sure that the website's centered. And that's good. Let me zoom back in. Yeah, I'll stay zoomed out so you can see it easier. So let's continue on. Next, let's work on the header. And don't worry, we'll get rid of that gray background soon. We'll do overflow. It's hidden. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to be floating elements within this div. And when you float an element, you need to make sure that somehow you clear it. Next, we need to give it a height of 100%. And this is just a hack for Internet Explorer 6. Sometimes with the overflow hidden, sometimes you need to specify 100% height to make sure it works in Internet Explorer 6. So needed for IE6. You're welcome to put this into an IE style sheet or just mix it in. It's really up to you. I could imagine doing both, and I have done both. Okay, next let's work on header image. The only image within the header is going to be this paper business section. So we'll do header img, and we will set it float to the left. Okay, and you immediately see everything kind of shifted up. So let's do next header, and then we're going to grab the navigation section. And I'm going to float that one to the right. That way we can kind of have the logo on the left and the navigation on the right. But you immediately see here, this isn't what we want over here with all that blue text. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and get rid of the blue anchor tags in our reset section. Now you might be wondering why Eric didn't do that. And the reason is he wanted to keep it as generic as possible. So you need to tailor the style sheet specifically for you. So you don't want him adding, changing the color of the anchor tags if that's not necessary. Stop doing that. Okay, so let's do A. Text decoration is none. And for now, I'm just going to give it a color of black, but we'll probably change that. And we want to make sure when the user hovers over the anchor tag, we add an underline. Okay, and that works fine. Okay, so coming back down to the navigation, we're going to float it to the right. I'm going to give it a font size of about 16 pixels. And let's go ahead and set the display of those list items to inline. That way they won't be right on top of each other. So nav li display inline, and let's give padding right to each one of about 27 pixels. Okay, so that kind of looks right. So now that we've done that, let's go back up to our nav and add a bit more. Let's set a position of relative. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I can't remember why I set that to relative, but most likely it's because maybe compensating for Internet Explorer or some weird quirk where, many times adding height 100% or setting the position to relative can fix a problem in IE. So I'm being perfectly honest with you, telling you I don't know why I did that. Okay, let's go ahead. Oh, and you know what? For that whole speech, looking at my notes, the reason I did it is so I could shift it down a little bit. So sorry for that speech, but yeah, in order to adjust to the top, left, right, and bottom values, you need to make sure that you position the parent element. Okay, that was embarrassing. Sorry. Moving along, let's look at what color we want the navigation to be. So we have this white text. So let's make sure we set that. So nav LIA. And we'll just set the color to white. Okay, that's fine for now. We'll work on that a little bit more later. So next, let's work on the featured section. And if you remember, that's this section right here, this rockable. So come down a little bit. And we'll do featured background. Let's have the background point to that paper texture. So we'll do images / featured bg.jpg is what I called it, and I do not want it to repeat. Okay, and now that's added on. If I zoom in, you can see it a little bit better. Okay, but I'll zoom out. Next, in our featured, I want to set a margin top of 54 pixels. Now, I got this value literally by measuring with the ruler how far the bottom of our logo is to the beginning of our paper. Now, you might think that's not too big of a deal, but usually with these designers, they spent a lot of time getting the spacing correct, so you want to make sure that you match it as closely as possible. So we give it a margin top of 54 pixels, and while we're at it, let's go ahead and get rid of this background of gray. Okay, so you can immediately see we're slowly beginning to get there, and it hasn't been too hard yet. Okay, next I'm going to set the overflow to hidden once again because I'm going to float the text and the images to the left and right respectively, so we need to clear that float. And finally, I'm going to set a padding on the right side to make sure that this text is just so close to the edge, and we'll set that to 35 pixels. Now once again, that came from measuring how far it is from the edge of the text to the edge of the border. Okay? Spacing is so important and padding is so important that you want to make sure you get it just right. And you will see that padding take effect as soon as we float our elements. Okay, featured image. So let's do featured, and then we're going to grab the image with an ID of featured image. Now I'm not sure if I added that. Let's go back and see if I did. Oh, yeah, I did. So we added a class of this featured section to make sure that we can target it specifically. So open that up, and we'll float this rockable logo to the left, and you can immediately see the text pops up. Well, good. Next, let's set a border, because if you come back, Jeffrey had, you see this very light border right here. So all I did was I used the eyedropper tool, grabbed the value of it. Let's go ahead and I can zoom in a little bit more just to show you. You grab that color, and then set that as a 1 pixel border on the website. So border, 1 pixel solid, and paste that in. Oh, get rid of that. Okay, so now we have the border, and you'll see the other side as soon as we add a little bit of margins. Okay, and margin 2.3 ems. Okay. So once again, the margin I just measured right here. How far is the spacing from the image to the edge? So that should be good for our featured image. Let's work on the heading 2, which is this rockable.com. So we'll do featured, and then heading 2 tags. The color is going to be a dark blue, which I grabbed from the PSD. And the font size is going to be, you know what, I just can't remember. Let's go back and check. I have some notes for this project, but not everything. So let's grab it, and he has it to 28 points or 28 pixels. So we'll set 28 pixels. Okay. Next, let's set a margin on the top. So we'll do margin top is 18 pixels, and that'll shift it down a little bit. And what else? Margin bottom of 15 pixels. Okay, and that's just going to push this text down ever so slightly. Okay, now let's style this paragraph a little bit more. So featured P, and I'm going to give it a color, and let's just go and grab it. Okay, click on that, 626262, grab that, come back, paste that in. Okay, so we use the nice gray. Remember, don't just use the default dark black. It almost never looks appropriate. Try to find, kind of a lighter grayish black, and it's really much easier on the eyes. And let's set a margin bottom to each paragraph of about 2.5 ems or 25 pixels. Yeah, and that gives that spacing, because if you come back, you can see he has a little bit of spacing right there. All right. Next, that should be that's good for now. We're going to come back and style the buttons later and style this details, but we'll come back. Let's work on the next section. We're going to work on the main. But you know what? Just so I don't forget, let's go ahead and do that. This interface plus design. So we'll do featured, and the P with an ID of details is what we gave it. Let's just set the color to 215379. And now you can see it has that blue coloring. And finally, let's give it a margin bottom 25 pixels. You know what? I'm looking at my notes here. Yeah, I guess that's right. Although I don't think it's necessary because I already gave it to the P up top. Yeah, so we can get rid of that. So remember, you can always continue modifying your work. All right, so now let's work on the main div, which wraps the slogan and each of those columns. So main, right off the bat, I want to set a new positioning context. That way, if I position anything absolutely, it will be positioned relatively to this new main div. So position, relative. Next, let's style our slogan, which is this right here. We build websites based on the latest web standards. So we'll do main, and then that was contained within a div with an ID of slogan. So let's give it a font size of 30 pixels. So if we measure this, measure that, it's 30 pixels. So that's what I set it to. We'll set a line height of about 32 pixels. Okay, so just a little bit more than the default. We want the color to be white. give it a padding top of 76 pixels. And once again, just using the measuring tool, okay? Padding top, now let's do padding bottom. We could put all of these into one, one long string if we want, but I'm not going to. 97 pixels. Okay, so he used quite a bit of spacing in his project, and I think it kind of gives it kind of a nice clean look. So 97 pixels on the bottom. And then finally, I set a width of 770 pixels. Now the reason I did that is because we don't want it to take up the entire span, because we will be adding this airplane shortly. Okay, now if you remember, he had websites and web standards colored blue. So let's go ahead and add that right now. We wrapped those strings within a span tag. So let's just give it a color in that blue. Let's go ahead and grab it. And just copy that color value and paste it in. Okay, that looks good. Now let's go ahead and position our airplane. So let's do main, img, and the name is main graphic. Now you might be wondering why sometimes I add img to the beginning and other times I don't. There's absolutely no reason to. It really doesn't add any more weight, so that's not the reason. Sometimes I do it just to remind myself down the road that main graphic, this is an image. Now, obviously with the ID, of course it's an image, but with other elements, sometimes I do prefix it with a tag name just to remind myself of what I'm working on. So the main graphic, let's position it absolutely. And remember, that's why we set the position to relative on the main div. Because if we removed it, like for example, let's put top 0. Okay, so top 0 is being placed at the top of the main div. If I removed this main section, watch what happens. It shifts to the top of the container div. So by adding position relative, we create a new positioning context. All right, let's get rid of top 0. And I'm going to position it right. We're going to move it negative 105 pixels from the right edge of the div. If I zoom out, you can see that a little bit better. And anything else? Yeah, we're going to push it down slightly, 35 pixels. Okay? Actually, I'm sorry, it's 35 pixels from the top of the div. Okay, so now let's work on some generic styling for the paragraph tags within the main div. And I'm going to give them a font size of 12 pixels, color of white, and a line height of 22 pixels. Okay, I might bring that line height down. I'm not sure what he set, but we'll come back to that. Okay, next, remember we have each of these divs. This is call 1, call 2, and call 3. So we could have given each one of those a class and then just reference the class, but I didn't do that, so we'll have to do it manually. Call 1, call 2, and call 3. We're going to float each one to the left. Okay, and we'll give them a width of 237 pixels. And that's what I came to. And if you want, copy. Oh, by the way, you should, every once in a while, just in case, just if you're working in the web developer toolbar, just copy everything that you've worked on so far, just in case if your browser unexpectedly closes, you don't lose 30 minutes worth of work. So every once in a while, I will just copy it, come back, and paste it in, okay, just to be safe. Okay, back to what I said. Let's give it a background of gray, each one, just to kind of see where we're working. And I'm going to give each one a margin right of 4.5 ems. Let's go ahead and get rid of that background color. Okay, so that's shifting that down. Now you might be wondering, what is this home about information doing? Remember, we just floated all of the columns to the left, meaning they are no longer taking up space in the markup. And this is the footer information. So while we're at it, let's just go ahead and do a quick styling for the footer and just set clear to both. Okay, now that shifts all of that information down to the bottom. So it's still overflowing. What we need to do is, and this is one of the nice features of CSS tables, by the way, you don't have to worry about this. But by adding a bit of margins to each column, we also added some margin right to the third column, but we don't really need that. So we'll have to go and target column 3 specifically and 0 out the margin. Margin right of 0. And what else? Margin bottom. I'm using 65 pixels, and that's just going to push down the footer ever so slightly. Okay, so this third one is still shifting down. Now, I feel like I measured this, but you know what I'll do? Let's just bring it down, because there may be a styling later. Yeah, let's just keep it like that for now, and we'll put in as a comment that it should be 237 if possible. Zoom in just a little bit more. I'm sorry we're having to do this, but it's the only way I can use the web developer toolbar. Okay, so zoom back out, and we may come back to that a little bit later. Okay, so now let's style the date. So if you remember this January 1, 2008 right here, that was put within a P with a class of date. So we'll do after column 3, call 3, P with a class of date. And we'll set the color to that blue, which is 65 BDFF. Click off that, and now it's blue. And I'm going to add a font size, and that's about 11 pixels is what Jeffrey set it to. And we're going to set a margin bottom to just very little, 0.3 ems, and it just shifts that down very little. Okay, now I want these headings to be white. So after column 3, let's get call 3 H5. Color is white. Font size, click off that. Font size should be 12 pixels. Font size, 12 pixels. Okay. So remember, if this text looks really smart, remember we're zoomed out, and once you zoom back in, it'll look better. I'm just zooming out for the tutorial. Okay, so now let's work on our footer some more. We've cleared both. Now we need to add that paper background to the footer as well. So we'll do background is URL images / footer bg.jpg, no repeat. And I'm going to set a static height. Remember, be careful with this, because if it overflows, you're going to have some problems. Once again, I don't think with this kind of footer that Jeffrey created, I don't think it needs to be anything more than that. So I doubt you'd be having to change the height. But keep that in mind, because you may want to take that out for your project. Set overflow to hidden, because we're going to float some of its children. And let's set a margin bottom to 2 ems. And that's because I want us to be able to scroll a little at the bottom. Otherwise, it would just show this footer would be right at the edge. Okay. Now let's style the unordered list, which contains the navigation. We're going to set a margin left to, well, first let's go ahead and float it to the left. And let's set a margin left of 3 ems. Height of 103 pixels. Once again, we're setting the height of the floated element equal to the height of the footer. And I did that because now, look, I can set a line height of 103 pixels, and it will vertically center the elements on the page. And in order to see that, we'll need to set the list items to display inline. Oh, and of course, we'll also have to float our paragraph. So we'll come back to that. Now, we'll do footer, the anchor tags, and the p tags within the footer. Let's set the color to 9F9F9F. Okay, and that's just, once again, it gets rid of the black and brings it down to kind of a light grayish color. And let's do actually a little bit more with our p. So we'll set float to right. Okay, so it shifts it all the way to the right side. Once again, height of 103 pixels and a line height of 103 pixels as well. There, and you see it's vertically centered now. What else? Margin right of 2 ems. And that just shifts it off for a bit. Okay. Alright, so why are these list items not showing up? Footer ULLI display on in Inline. Nope, display Inline. Okay, now they're showing up, but they're still a little off center. So let's see if we can fix that. So my best guess is this unordered list has some extra margins at the top. So once again, a good way to check is just give it a background color and see where your edges are. Yeah, you see we have that little extra thing. So I'm assuming it's inheriting a margin from somewhere. So margin top, let's set that to 0. Yeah, and it shifts it back up. Get rid of margins. Get rid of the background, and maybe the margin left is too much. Let's go back and see what Jeffrey did at the bottom. Scroll to the bottom, and let's measure it. And what do we have? About 20 pixels. So let's change it from 3ems to 20 pixels. And even that looks too much. That's interesting. I wonder why it's so much more. If I come down to 0, yes, see, if I come down to 0, that's actually about right. But 0, it should be flush against the edge, so something is pushing that away. Margin, I wonder if there's some kind of margin that I don't know about. Margin left, padding left. No, I don't know. You know what? I'd have to do a little bit of research on my own. But I'm not going to hold up your time. That's fine for now. We'll just come back and fix that later. Okay, so now we just need to do a little more cleanup as far as maybe some general styling. So we'll add that to our reset. I don't want my anchor text to be black. Instead, I'm going to use that blue that we've been using for a while. So let's set a color to 65 BDFF. Okay, and now it changes the read more and the learn more anchor tags to a nice blue. What else? Let's style just the general paragraph tags. Let's do a line height of 20 pixels and a font size of 13 pixels. And margins, we'll set 0, 0, 1em on the bottom margin, and 0 on the left. Okay, now we need to style, if you remember, if we come back, this paper business is bold and it's a darker color. So let's go and see what I did here. Oh, looks like I cut something out. Copyright 2008, paper business. So let's come back, copy that, refresh the page, paste. Okay, come down here, and we need to change this to a darker color. So if I zoom in, come down, and it probably already is fine, but let's go ahead and add a specific color. And we'll just do that in general to all strong tags. So we'll do strong. Let's give it a color of 6C, 6C, 6C. Okay, and that just makes it kind of a deeper grayish color. Okay, we're probably in the last 20% of the work. Now, obviously, I don't want these what we do latest blog headings to be black. So let's go and fix that. We will style that in the column section. So we'll do it right here. So do column 1, H2, column 2, H2, and column 3, H2. And let's set the color to white and a font size of about 28 pixels. And finally, maybe a margin bottom of 20 pixels just to shift them down, shift the paragraph down. And if we come back, you can see he kind of did the same thing where you just have a good bit of spacing. Okay, look how much better that looks already now that we turned it white and got rid of the black. So we actually have no black on the page. We just have darker shades of gray. So what I want to work on now is we need to line up this paper business and the navigation, and then we need to work on the buttons. So let's first work on this spacing problem. And you know what I'm thinking is I had the same problem down here, and it's all with unordered lists. And I'm thinking by accident, maybe when we first got started, I removed the reset for the unordered list, and that's what's adding the default margin and padding. Yeah, you see OL, UL, list style, none, but did I zero out? Yeah, I think I accidentally erased that, so let's add that in. Unordered list, ordered list, and definition list, which we won't even use. Yeah, that does it, because you see right here, it came right back up. So if we remove that styling, it adds the default browser margins, and if we add it in, it zeroes it out. And I wonder if we go back down to the footer, if we're going to see that. Yeah, there it is. See, if you stick with it long enough, you can always figure out what your problem is. So margin left, I believe we had that set to 20 pixels. So while I have you here, take a minute and look over this footer unordered list and see if you see anything that could cause some problems. Okay, so if you need to, just pause, look at it very closely. Don't look for typos, but just look at stylings and browsers and see if there's anything that would happen. Okay, so the issue here is with Internet Explorer 6, and it's something called the double margin bug. Now, when you float a child element and then add margins that are in the same direction as the float, like this, we floated it to the left and then we added margin left, Internet Explorer 6 will incorrectly double the margins. So what you could do, as far as remedies, you could import a JavaScript file that will fix that for you. You could create a conditional style sheet for IE6 and then access this style and change it to 10 pixels, 1/2 of what it should be, because then when it's doubled, it'll be correct. Or you could just use kind of a hack, something that will target IE6 and below only. The one I typically use the most, if I'm going to go that method, is the underscore hack. It's simple, it works. Basically what you do is you add an underscore and then margin left, and you set it to 1/2. Now basically the way it will work is modern browsers will see this underscore and completely ignore the entire style. Internet Explorer 6 will assume it's a typo and will go ahead and read it. So that's a nice way that you can target Internet Explorer 6 specifically, but not other browsers. So you won't see the change here, but I promise you when you go to IE6, you will see it. So I'm going to copy that, and it's always a good idea to comment it, needed for IE6. And we could even put DM bug for double margins. So let's go ahead and copy that, because we will need to do the same thing for the paragraph. And by the way, an alternative for the double margin is, if you can, just change it from margin to padding, which truthfully we could have done in this situation, but I thought it was a good example to show you guys. So, whoops, not the right place. Let's put it margin right 1em, copy that in, and add our underscore hack. Okay, so now let's go back and let's work on our buttons a little bit. So after my reset, let's add a new one, and we'll call it inputs. Now I'm not going to add too many here for the screencast, but this is where you would style your input tags and your buttons and all that. So let's do div with a class, you don't type class, div with the class of buttons, and let's do a bit of styling. The first thing that I want to do, if you remember, Jeffrey had a very slight gradient on these buttons, and I saved that gradient, so let's go ahead and add it in right now. So the URL is images / let me look at my notes, button gradient bg.png. And we don't want, actually we do, repeat along the x-axis. And there you can see it there, but we haven't set a width, so it doesn't look right just yet. Now, I want some spacing between these buttons, so I'll set a margin right of about 1em. Next, a height of 19 pixels. That's how high our buttons are going to be. A line height of 19 pixels as well, and this will vertically center any text within. Put some padding all around our button, maybe 1/2 an em. Okay, just gives us some breathing room. Float each of these to the left, and now we kind of have that shrink wrap effect, which is nice. And let's set a color to 038085. And you know what? I can't even remember what that did. Oh yeah, it changes the 1/4 to a darkish blue. And then finally, let's add a font size of maybe 14 pixels. Okay, yeah, that looks about right. So now we need to simulate let's zoom out. We need to simulate the rounded edges right here. So what I decided to do is I could use a background image, but I'm a big fan of your site doesn't have to look exactly the same in every browser, especially a browser that's going on 9 years old at all. So what is the big deal if you have a rounded corner in Firefox and Safari and Chrome, but not in Internet Explorer? Who cares, okay? It's their own fault for using the browser. So let's add it in right now. And the way we can do it is using some browser-specific stylings. The first one for Mozilla is -moz -border -radius, and I chose about 10 pixels. So if I zoom in, you can immediately see in Firefox now we have those rounded edges. And then finally, WebKit. This will target the WebKit browsers. So WebKit -border -radius, 10 pixels. And that will change it for them. Once again, not going to work in Internet Explorer. Not going to work in some kind of different browser, but no big deal, okay? Okay, now I believe, yeah, he had a border around these of kind of a grayish color. So let's add that in right now. We'll do border is 1 pix solid gray. And you know what, let's just go ahead and grab that specific color. Grab that. And he had BF, BF, BF. It's always good. I probably just put gray because it was close. That's added in. Yeah, now we have kind of our nice rounded edges. You know what? I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like the gradient that I cut out wasn't tall enough. I wonder if you can see this if I zoom in. Yeah, our gradient wasn't tall enough to fit it. So why don't we see, maybe I can lower this down to like 13, maybe 12. And then if I lower the line height to 12, yeah, and that fits it. Maybe that's the original size of his button. But it's still lower here. Let's see what I did wrong. Now, view portfolio, this is not vertically centered, and my best guess is because of this image right here. What if we do buttons img, and let's just remove it from the markup and see if that fixes it. Position absolute. Yeah, and it did. You see that was the problem. So the way we can fix this is, I don't know. Give me a minute to think about this. Why don't we, for now, since I measured that gradient wrong, I assumed it was bigger than it was, the image is too big. So let's set the image, let's set the height of the image equal to the height of our div. Yeah, and that fixes it. So now if I zoom out, we have our nice little buttons. So I'm going to copy this out, come back to my project, paste it in. Now there is one thing I need to change. If we come back, refresh the page, it's going to look white. And the reason is because if we come in, our style sheet is referencing the images folder. Now it works fine in the browser, but when we come back, we're going to need to change the paths to add a period slash at the beginning. So let's do that right now. Search for images and change it to period slash images. And 4 occurrences were replaced. Come back, refresh the browser, and now this is what we have. So let's just kind of quickly look over it, see if I made any mistakes. Zoom out a little bit. Now just take a few minutes. The one thing that I'm a little unhappy with right now is I don't feel like the who we are, what we do, and latest blog are lining up correctly. If we come back to Jeffrey's, his section, I believe he has the edge of his latest blog all the way on the right of our div. So if I view his grids, yeah, look, he had a grid here, and the edge of the text lines up perfectly with the edge of this paper and the footer. So I need to fix that because that's part of what makes this layout. So, tell you what, I'm going to pause for 20 seconds and work on this a little bit, and then I'll get right back to you. So, here's what I decided to do. Let's come back. What I'm going to do is go back to the columns, and if I can find it, call 1, call 2, call 3. Come back here, and I'm viewing the grid. If I measure the distance between each of these sections he had, it comes out to about 20 pixels. So let's change that. Margin right of 20 pixels to each one. All right. Now, if I measure the width of each of these, he has about 246, but then when I measured the next one, this one is 246. Okay, that looks good. And then the next one, 248. Okay, so let's set a width of 247 pixels. Let's see if we can get away with a little bit more because it's pretty close, but I just want it to be a little bit more. What if we set the margin right to a little bit more? Just to give it a little more breathing room. Yeah, and that's pretty close. Maybe we can even move the width up to... Yeah, see, this is the problem with floated layouts. They're very sticky. But you know what? I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to copy that, come back, paste it in, and I need to do my quick fix again. Close this, refresh it, and this is at least tentatively our finished project. So once again, let's just spend a little more time. I don't want to waste your time, but you know, this is kind of how it works. Yeah, it looks good. So now let's view this in some other browsers. Let's go into Chrome. Right off the bat here in Chrome, we have this issue here with padding, so we'll need to fix that. And I wonder if I set a static font, not a static font, but just a general font. And I'm thinking I didn't, so I'll need to do that right now. So let's go up to the top and find body, line height of 1, font size. I have 62.5%, and that's actually an old hack to be able to use M's easily. I think I'm probably going to get rid of that because I've read plenty of bad things about it, and people aren't in favor of it. But that's a discussion for another day. So Jeffrey was using Arial. The backups will be Helvetica and then any sans serif. Refresh it, and now we have our correct font. Yeah, and that I guess I adjusted for a 62.5% layout, and that fixed any kind of margin problems. So okay, looks good. Pretty darn good in Chrome. Let's go to the next one. Let's go to, this is what you should do with every project. Now let's go into IE7. And I have to be perfectly honest, I cringe every time I do this because I've said it before. It determines how much longer you're going to have to work. And I've had times where it's taken me another hour, or more to fix some problem. But let's look. Actually, not too bad. It looks like we have a few, like this looks like it's a little small, but generally that's actually pretty darn good. Let's copy that, and now let's view it in IE6. Let's cringe a little bit, so I'm not sure what it'll look like. Ooh. Okay, so we need to fix this. The first step, and sometimes IE6 makes it look a lot worse than it really is. Sometimes it's just one or two fixes. The same way as when you're you're validating your HTML, you may come up with 50 errors, but that might just be 3 mistakes. So the first thing that I want to do is take care of the transparent ping issue. So I'm going to let's go to nettuts.com, and if you guys remember a couple weeks ago, I did a screencast on fixes for IE6. So let's go ahead and access that right now. If you haven't already, by the way, please subscribe to the RSS feed. It allows us to continue doing these screencasts. And let me find it. 5 easy ways to tackle IE6's transparency issues. And the one I'm going to use now is the DD_belated ping. And if you need to, you can watch a video tutorial on it. And let's go ahead and grab it, download it here. And here's their main website. And if you have some free time and you're unfamiliar with it, go ahead and kind of view the document. The first step you need to do is download the JavaScript file. Now, go ahead and click on that. I've already done so let me just grab it real quickly. I have it in Slice and Dice PSD within a JavaScript file. I originally used the unit ping fix, but I changed my mind on that. So let's just copy this JavaScript file and bring it into our new solution. And paste it in. Okay, so now we have our new file. So let's go back and see what they say to do next. The way that you can target, let's zoom back in. The way that we can target specific transparent pings is you do dd underscore belated ping dot fix, and then you pass in the element or the name. So why don't we just grab all of this script, come back to our Notepad++, and just paste it in. So after the link, let's clean this up real quickly. Okay, so if IE6, import this script, and we can get rid of some of these examples. Then we call dd underscore belated ping dot fix, and then we just pass it in. So let's see what we need to get. We need to fix the logo. We need to fix, I thought there was one other. Oh yeah, the airplane that isn't even showing up. You can see how people just want to tear their hair out because you think you're done and you find out that 25% of your audience, or it's actually I think down to 20, can't even use your website. So I don't blame people that go crazy. So let's just pass it in. Fix, what is the name of the logo? I think we can do header img. And the next one I want to fix is our airplane. So we have slogan img, or we can just access it by the ID of main graphic. So, comma, main graphic. Save it, come back to IE6, refresh the page. An error as occurred dd underscore belated ping is undefined. That means it can't find the script file, and that's because we stored it within a JS folder. So we'll do js/dd underscore belated ping, refresh it. Let's do refresh complete, and it still can't find it. All right, hold on, let me figure this out. We need to go back, and you see I actually downloaded the minified version, which is compressed, and this is referencing the uncompressed version. So let's just grab that and paste it in. Okay, let's see if that did it, hopefully. Refresh it. Okay, so you can immediately see just fixing the transparency issue has at least made our site a little bit better. We got the logo working, we have no transparency problems, but now we have this issue with the airplane on the wrong side, and it seems like our featured section isn't containing its floats. So let's just go ahead and quickly create a new file, and I'm going to save it as, in the CSS folder, we'll call it ie.css. The first thing I want to do is we're going to work on that featured section. Now, sometimes if you come into this, if you have set overflow hidden and it still seems like the parent element isn't containing the float, sometimes just simply adding position relative and or a height of 100% will fix the problem. So let's try that real quickly. Refresh the page. And oh, I'm sorry. We've created it, but we still need to reference it. So let's go back. If IE6 link rel equals style sheet, and the href is css/ie.css. Save it, come back, refresh the page. Yeah, and now it's amazing, but adding position relative or height of 100% can fix many IE errors. And you can see, of course, that fixed the airplane somehow, because somehow it was being shifted down. So, at least is it me, or does it look like latest blog is slightly lower than these? Maybe not. If you guys know of a Firefox plugin that has like a ruler Firefox plugin, I would love something very similar to Photoshop. If I go off task real quick, something like this in Firefox where I can just bring a ruler down and measure things. And I'm sure there is one, and if I looked for it, I could find it. But if you guys know of one right off the bat, send me a link to that, maybe in the comments form. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go in IE7, refresh it. Yeah, and so you see it took just a few minutes to fix IE6. So as much as I hate it, I think you should still support it because it doesn't require that much more work. All right, guys, and what, about an hour with some in-depth training, you guys were able to take a nice Web 2.0 theme and turn it into HTML. The final thing that we need to do is just make sure that we didn't make any CSS or HTML errors. So let's first validate our local CMS. Ooh, we found the following errors. Moz border, WebKit, margin left. Okay, so I want to talk about this for a quick 30 seconds. There is no need to change this. Some people are so adamant about getting your files to validate that they forget the exact reason of why you validate. And I actually kind of talked about this on Twitter not too long ago. The reason to validate is to make sure that you haven't personally made any problems that you're unaware of. So in this case, I am fully aware that I'm using browser-specific stylings that don't validate, but it's not going to affect the layout 1 inch. So I do not need to worry about this. When I validate, I need to be looking for typos. I need to be looking for invalid properties and things like that. Not browser-specific stylings. These are fine. So that looks good. That's fully validating, in my opinion. Now let's do validate local, whoops, wrong page, come back, validate local HTML. And this document was successfully checked as HTML strict. All right, guys, so let's zoom out, see the final product, and let's go into Photoshop. Actually, let's do this. If you're watching, congratulations. I'm going to use a Firefox plugin to copy the page. I'm going to come back to Photoshop and hide that, create a new file, paste it in, and let's just crop that down real quick. And now let's go to the window and tile vertically. Let's go to this one, and let's just take a final look. So the one on the left is the PSD, and the one on the right, let's see if we can zoom out at all. That's close enough. The one on the right is the HTML, the one on the left is the PSD, and you can see they're pretty darn close. I see a couple minor issues, like I might like the slogan to be a little bit wider. And, you know, other than that, it's really pretty darn close considering the amount of time that we worked on this. So for more tips and tutorials, please visit nettouch.com. As always, if you are not a subscriber, please subscribe. The more you subscribe, the more money we can put into this site, and the more video tutorials and the more training. So it's a simple thing. It's free to do. Just click on subscribe. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.